try and bring some people in here. Yeah. It's going to be an interesting night. Interesting night. I'm going to get a few people in here, share the link. Hey, how's it going? So we got a doozy this week. The first story is a fun little steampunk pirate story, taking place in the cargo hold of a Zeppelin, which will be fun. And it's going to test my bounds, as it's got me speaking some German, some Italian, some Japanese. I get to butcher an Irish accent. That'll be fun. And then the second story we have coming up is going to destroy everybody. It's going to just traumatize everybody. So that'll be a lot of fun. We'll see how this goes. I'll give it some time for some people to get in here. Oh, nice. So you can absolutely tell me how badly I butcher this. I did try to memorize the pronunciations of the few words that I am going to be saying. So hopefully it goes pretty well, but we'll see. I'm going to try not to butcher the accents that I'm going to throw with them too, but I'm going to try and have a little bit of fun tonight. Why not? All right, so we got a few people in here. Absolutely. Hey, Mark, how you doing? Everybody, fantasy steampunk author is Mark Piggott. He's our first book right here. Mark, thank you for stopping by. I'm just telling everybody how badly I'm going to butcher the German pronunciation, the Japanese, the Italian pronunciation. This will be a good night. So let me pull up here, and I'm going to do a synopsis read for Corsair. Give me 1 second to get in here. Listening while you write. It's a good way to do it. And respect for that, absolutely. Hold on 1 second. Sorry about that. All right. The kids were screaming in the background and want to. They got to get ready for bed, anyways. All right. So synopsis read. Here we go. For Corsair and the Sky Pirates, which is the first cover right up here. It's going to be the first one I'm reading, and it's a brilliant inventor, a prolific writer. A chance meeting between Nikola Tesla and Jules Verne catapulted the world into a new kind of power. Using meteor fragments from a comet named Uriel, they created a world powered not by combustion, but by steam. The incredible inventions that followed launched the world into an industrial revolution ahead of its time, a steampunk revolution. While Tesla's inventions were designed to ease people's day-by-day burdens, or day-to-day burdens, Thomas Edison's ERP Corporation used their power and influence to ensure people paid for their modern miracles. One man brought hope to the people as he pursued Tesla's dreams of invention for the everyday person. His exploits were legendary, his crew infamous, and his airship a vision of the future. Corsair and the Sky Pirates. So that'll be our first read tonight. I'll go ahead and I'm going to pop his display image up. There we go. I'm going to get myself out of the way and the music title out of the way, so we can take a look at that beautiful cover. There we go. I've also got Mark's TikTok handle up there. But again, he is in the chat. Fantasy steampunk author. By all means, go give him a follow. And I'm going to go get started on this. Let me pull this up here real quick and get some water. Okay, so this excerpt is from Chapter 1, titled Heist on the Valiant. The cargo hold of the Valiant was in a state of complete chaos. Automatic weapons fire rang out as bullets bounced around the room. Several Pinkertons and the boss unit, a two-person behemoth with a pilot and an engineer, were on one side. The pilot controlled the mech, including movement and firing the weapons. Simultaneously, the engineer kept the steam pressure operating the complex systems under control and the ammunition flowing into the guns. Pipes, gears, and hoses moved the mech, acting like a human frame with arms and legs, but under mechanical operation. Across the way, Kiki and her team were pinned down behind cargo crates and stacks of luggage by the constant fire. A hailstorm of bullets rang out, tearing through everything, with no regard for personal or property damage. This situation was why the airship lines had insurance, especially for pirates. Kiki braced herself against the luggage rack, a Colt revolver in one hand and her katana in the other. She looked across from her, watching Nox and Dash bracing themselves against the onslaught of firepower. "We can't stay here forever, Fraulein Kiki," Nox shouted over the gunfire. "Those verdammte Maschinen are indestructible." "Except behind the knees," Kiki said. "That's why all their firepower is forward-facing." "Ah, then leave it to me, Signora," Dash countered. "Nox, I need a distraction." Nox knew what Dash wanted. He stood straight up and opened fire, blasting back at the boss. Although it barely scratched the surface of the machine, it did cause the Pinkertons to scatter. Nox took the brunt of the gunfire in his armored chest plate, while Dash quickly went to work. He peeked around Nox's massive legs, using him for protection while setting up his shot. If there was one thing Dash was good at, it was a trick ricochet shot. He loved the new Western motion pictures, and thought of himself as a cowboy trying to outsmart the villain to save a damsel in distress. After a few good looks, he squared up and aimed with his Colt revolver. It took seconds for him to fire, bouncing the bullet off some piping before it hit the boss right behind its right knee. The shot was near perfect, breaking a hydraulic line that started spraying fluid. The slippery mess caused the Pinkertons hiding behind the monstrosity to slip and fall to the ground, leaving them open to Nox's barrage as he adjusted his firing to cut them down, one by one. The boss unit went down to one knee, forced to use its gun arm to prop itself up. It appeared to be over until the pilot raised its other arm to fire. This one had a different weapon from the Gatling gun, a 7.5-centimeter howitzer cannon. ERP hadn't designed it for use in an enclosed space like the cargo hold, but the boss pilot didn't care. "Amadeo!" Kiki swore in Japanese when she saw the robotic soldier aiming the cannon at them. She froze in fear and thought it was the end of everything, until he arrived. Corsair jumped over the rail from the top catwalk, sword in hand, and spiraled toward the boss unit. His blade plunged through the roof of the mech, piercing the cockpit. He flipped a switch inside his basket hilt and revealed the real power of his sword. The gears on the basket hilt spun to reform into a new configuration. The pommel's stone glowed when it was complete, a piece of Uriel activating. The sword exploded with an immense electrical discharge, sending it downward into the boss unit until every electrical system shorted out, killing the pilot and engineer. His rubber-soled boots saved Corsair from electrocution. One of the Pinkertons aimed at Corsair, but he was stopped by Mooncrow up on the catwalk. His Winchester blew the gun right out of the Pinkerton's hand. He dropped to his knees, clenching his hand in pain as his gasping wound bled out. Kiki jumped out and laid her sword across his throat, ready to silence him. "Wait a minute, Kiki," Corsair commanded, stopping her in her tracks. "We need him alive." He pulled out his sword and jumped off the boss unit, careful not to slip on the mech's hydraulic fluid. Corsair walked up to the whimpering prisoner, adding his blade to Kiki's. The Pinkerton, grasping tightly at the wound on his hand, looked closely at the two edges pointing at him. "Now then, unless you want to end up like your friends, you'd better start talking," Corsair insisted. "Where is the piece of Uriel?" He trembled violently, uncertainty growing in his eyes. He decided on the latter. "It's inside the unit," he whimpered, nodding toward the inactive mech. Corsair pulled out a handkerchief from his breast pocket and handed it to the injured Pinkerton. "You'd better wrap that tightly. You might bleed to death," he said. He quickly grabbed the cloth and wrapped it around his injured hand to stem the bleeding. Corsair walked over to the boss to see if what the Pinkerton had said was true. "Do you believe him?" Kiki asked. Corsair flipped his sword around, pointing the blade to the floor, grasping the hilt. He placed his thumb on the pommel, flipping another switch as the gears on his basket hilt started moving again. "We'll soon find out," he cautioned as the gears finished their alignment. The gem emitted a soft light over the mechanical soldier. It moved up and down in a straight line, slowly examining the structure. Finally, it stopped below the cockpit and paused, as if the same puzzle pieces found each other. "It's nice to see Signor Tesla's device at work. So meraviglioso," Dash complimented, blowing a kiss with his fingers. Corsair thought about what Dash had said before he sheathed his sword. "Cut her open, Kiki," he ordered before lowering his goggles and adjusting the lenses. Kiki stepped forward. Like Corsair's cutlass, her katana had a secret all its own. She twisted the outer ring of the guard until it clicked, popping open 2 small valves on either side of the blade collar. A spray of blue flame immediately spread up the sword, sheathing it in a super-hot corona. Kiki plunged the blade into the cockpit, carving a hole as if her sword was a superheated acetylene torch. Corsair watched intently as he casually tapped the side of his goggles to a melodic beat. "Not to worry, boys. We'll have this sardine can open shortly," Kiki said confidently. Once she finished, the steel plate fell open, rattling off the deck. Steam rushed out, along with a powerful smell of charred flesh. The smell of death never bothered Corsair. In all his years of pirating, he'd become used to it. Corsair reached under the pilot's seat and pulled out a locked strongbox. The steel container was the size of a shoebox, with a hinged lid and a large padlock securing it shut. He carefully set it down on top of a crate, trying to keep it level. "Dash, open it," he ordered his best lockpick. Dash winked at him. Corsair knew he always had the right tool for the job. Dash pulled out what appeared to be a cigarette from his shirt pocket and put it in his mouth before striking a match nonchalantly off Knox's armor. He lit the cigarette, but didn't inhale like one usually would. Instead, he let it burn slowly before placing the lit end into the locking mechanism. Within seconds, the small pop of an explosion burst open the lock. "It is easy for a genio like me," he boasted before Knox pulled him back so Corsair could get into the box. He pulled the lock off and opened the lid slowly, as a soft blue glow radiated from inside. It was something truly amazing to see, even for Corsair. Inside a glass cylinder was the largest piece of Uriel's comet that he'd ever laid his eyes on before. It was suspended inside the glass tube by a magnetic field generated between metal caps sealing both ends of the tube. He picked up the glass container in his hand and looked at the glowing meteorite in awe. Everyone else was equally amazed by the size of the mineral. "Lieber Gott, that's got to be 3 to 5 kilograms, Knox marveled. "That's enough power to run the Galeru for 1,000 years, Kiki blurted out. "It's amazing." "It's bait," Corsair plainly stated, "and we've walked into a trap." He carefully put the fragment back into the box and closed the lid, tucking it under his arm. "We need to get back to the ship. Now!" Before they could move, they heard the sound of footsteps rushing into the upper catwalks. When they looked up, the ship's security quickly filed into position, with some of the Pinkertons mixed into their ranks. They surrounded them from above, aiming their weapons down at the pirates, ready to fire. Everyone looked up at more than 50 guns aimed at them. They couldn't believe the number of armed security personnel standing up there, more than double the standard complement for a Valiant Zeppelin. "Where did all these goons come from?" Kiki asked. "They were acting as passengers to confuse our scans with the RMF," Corsair said. This whole setup was a trap, specifically for us. A single person clapping their hands echoed in the cargo hold. Corsair watched and waited to see who led the applause, and then he recognized him immediately. Clapping his hands with a sarcastic smirk to match his glee, an unusual-looking man strolled out onto the catwalk. His bright red hair and stark white skin earned him the nickname the Red Ghost, attributed to his appearance and brutal methods of getting things done. He had worked his way up through ERP, keeping workers in lines, breaking up strikes, and bullying corporate bosses to accept ERP's demands during tense negotiations. He wore a bowler hat on his head, a fine suit befitting a man of his stature, and carried a shillelagh under his arm. His name was Daniel McTavish, director of ERP security. "Well done, boyo, but you figured it out a little too late," he jeered. "I guess you're not as smart as people say you are, eh, Corsair?" "Oh, I don't know, Duke. The smart thing wouldn't have been letting me get to Creusi, steal his thinking machine, or taking down a boss unit." Corsair sassed back, calling McTavish by another nickname he despised. He was sometimes called Duke because of his penchant for fighting, always wanting to duke it out with others. He hated the nickname because it reminded him of his lowly past and many failures. "This little venture of yours will cost ERP a lot of money. And for what, Duke?" "For that," McTavish said, pointing at Corsair's blade. "Your sword." Corsair couldn't help but laugh. "What? With all the brains working for Edison, he still can't figure out how to accurately track down pieces of Uriel? Really? Tesla worked that problem out a long time ago." McTavish hated seeing his boss insulted by a common thief like Corsair. He held Edison in the highest regard and with nothing but respect, and this banter of Corsair's upset him. Still, McTavish smiled, thinking he had the upper hand. "Oh, I wouldn't worry about that, since I'll be prying that sword from your dead hands," he said as the men cocked their weapons to open fire. In an instant, Dash pulled a bomb out of his pack and slapped it on the box containing Uriel's fragment, holding the plunger in his hand. McTavish's smile shifted to a frown as he held up his hands, stopping the security forces from firing down into the hold. See, Duke, you're a lot smarter than you look," Corsair said, countering his insult. "And by the way, Dash here's got a hair-trigger finger, so don't try anything stupid. Now, I figure that this bomb, combined with the fragment's power, will blow this entire ship to pieces. That includes Creusi, the passengers, these men, and your sorry ass." "You'll be dead too, mate. Don't forget that," McTavish snapped back. "Now, I'm not worried about my death, Duke. Every day I meet more and more like me, ready to fight back against ERP and any other corporation willing to kill for its profit," Corsair said. "The day of the corporate ruler is over. The day of the freedom fighter is coming anew, and there's nothing a bully like you can do to stop it." McTavish had thought he had the upper hand over these pirates. Instead, he had to stand there and endure insults and bravado by these brigands. His blood boiled, but he would be more concerned if his intricate plan fell apart. "I tell you what, me boyo, why don't we settle this man to man?" McTavish countered. "If you beat me, you get to walk out of here with that piece of Uriel and your lives. If I win, you surrender. Pure and simple." Corsair had the face of a champion poker player as he stared McTavish down. He thought for a moment, not saying a word, as if he were considering the offer. "Come on, boy. What do you say?" McTavish shouted down as his anger got the best of him. "You either fight me or blow us all to hell. Which is it?" "Plan C," Corsair retorted. His answer confused McTavish. The head of security started laughing, thinking the pirate had gone mad. "What the hell is Plan C?" he asked, as if on cue, the answer came down through the ceiling. A single drop tube broke through the cargo hold. They didn't typically extend down this far, and it had to pierce the superstructure and rip through one of the hydrogen bladders. Moreover, by forcing the drop tube this far down into the Valiant, there was no way to seal the opening behind it as helium poured into the cargo hold. The downdraft choked out the men on the catwalk, as McTavish could only stand there and watch the pirates squeeze into their boarding elevator. Knox had to leave his Gatling gun and ammunition backpack behind to make enough room for all 5 of them. Kiki was the most uncomfortable, getting in tight quarters with 4 men. The Irish bully was so enraged that he reached into his coat and drew his own Colt M1900. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Corsair warned before he could squeeze the trigger. "There's enough hydrogen in here to blow us all to bits. Now, I know you don't want to kill Edison's best friend, do you?" McTavish thought about it before he holstered his weapon. "Next time, Corsair. Your arse is mine." Corsair smiled and sarcastically saluted as he got into the drop tube before the door shut. As quickly as it came in, the drop tube extracted through the drop tube retracted through the Zeppelin and returned to the Galeru. In an instant, the pirates were gone. McTavish stood there, boiling as he stared at the empty ceiling. "Sir!" one of the Pinkertons yelled at him. "We have to evacuate and seal the cargo hold, or the hydrogen will suffocate us." McTavish acquiesced before he spun on his heels and stormed out of the room. He had lost this battle, but he would win the war. And there's the end of the excerpt. I apologize, I fumbled a little bit, but hopefully that did not detract from what an excellent scene that was. I don't know if that's the beginning of the of chapter 1 or if that's just an excerpt from chapter 1, but still very, very well done. Let me bring my webcam back up here. So I saw some chats coming through here. I'm just going to kind of catch up a little bit. Just an excerpt near the end. Okay. And thank you. Yeah, this was an excellent read. I really enjoyed it. I tried to have a little bit of fun with the accents. Some went okay, some not so much. But no, it was really well done. And I like the way you blend and mix these different kind of cultures together into this. And I really like the storyline of kind of like a what if with Tesla versus Edison and this kind of new world standing up. Kind of what, like superseding almost the Industrial Revolution, or kind of branching out in history to this fantasy world with this own sort of Industrial Revolution. I think it's brilliant. I think it's really well done. And I'm definitely going to check this out and see if I can't dig a little bit deeper into it, because, you know, it was, like I said, just an exciting read. Okay. So, without further ado, I am going to switch off to the other one. If anybody has any questions for Mark, again, fantasy steampunk author right there in the chat, by all means, ask him any questions you want, chat with him a little bit. Please go give him a follow and check out his book. I don't have the page up just yet. I'm a little behind on that one, but right after this live, I will put the page up on my website so that you guys can view the synopsis and links to support the author, as well as purchase the book. Same for the next upcoming author, which is Kurt Ellis. So let me go ahead and take down Mark's, go back to the promo. And I am going to give a little precursor before this next read. So, The Boy in the Barn over here by Kurt Ellis. The excerpt that he sent me is a little bit from the introduction, which is kind of more like a trigger warning, kind of warning readers of what they're about to get into. And the other part of the excerpt is his final thoughts on the book. From what I'm guessing is the final chapter, it's chapter 29. And it's a basic summary, it seems like. I haven't read the book, so I'm guessing that it's a summary of kind of what happened in the book, and as the chapter's titled, Final Thoughts. So even though the introduction talks about a lot of the trauma he goes through, which is truly heartbreaking for my read-through, nothing that would get me in trouble on TikTok or nothing that would offend anybody is in this excerpt. So despite the trigger warning that you'll hear in the introduction of this, please don't shy away from the live. Please stick around and hear the experience that Kurt has had, because this is based on his own life, his own experience. So As I said, it will definitely mess with you, hit you right in the feels. And so please stick around and hear it out, just like you did for Mark's. I'm going to jump right into Boy in the Barn. So let me get his banner up here. And again, get me out of the way so you can check out. Again, just like Mark's, this is a very fantastic cover. So I'm just going to appreciate that for a second, get myself some water, and get into the reading. Okay. So here's the excerpt from the introduction, and I'll break away and mention when we get to chapter 29 as well. So here's the excerpt from the introduction. My emotional and harrowing story is based on a collection of events from early childhood until the present. I intend to share a story of childhood, SA trauma, its effects, my long journey of struggles to overcome, my unwavering determination to survive, and my dogged determination to succeed. As a reader, be warned. Oh, please be warned of many things. My story is a profound, raw, balls-out depiction of deplorable violence, SA, and suffering. It speaks to the truth about rapes and what they really are and how they affect one's psyche. Unfortunately, there were no politically correct whitewashings of the violent depictions within the story to make it a bit comfier and more palatable for the reader. My story may come across this way, but it is not intentionally anti-Catholic. On the contrary, I grew up Catholic, and many of my perpetrators were Catholic. So yes, I did write about many of those experiences. But nevertheless, some of my abusers were also Protestant. Pedophiliacs, sexual abusers, and perpetrators of violence are across all strata of society, regardless of religious preference and social hierarchy. There are many graphic details of SA, obscene language, brutality, violence, and racism of the time that may be offensive or triggering for readers. As a result, this book may be overwhelmingly dark, depressing, and off-putting. Therefore, this book should only be read by adults and just as critically by readers with a solid mental constitution. My book is not for the faint of heart. My story may be distressing for some readers to understand and difficult for others to believe. Any advice I may offer in this book is simply based on my own personal experience. I must be clear that I am not a medical professional, therapist, counselor, psychologist, or psychiatrist. None of the above or any related profession. The purpose of this book, however, is to provide inspiration and support for sexually abused people or people who were cruelly suppressed by the events in life beyond their control. My story begins with a horrible event that occurred to me when I was 11 years old. Although not my first occurrence, this was one of the most physically painful, and it surely would not be the worst or the last. Now that you've been duly warned, read this if you dare. Oh, and if you have a heart and are so inclined, keep a box of tissues nearby. You're going to need them. Many tissues. That's the excerpt from the introduction. Now on to chapter 29, which is titled Final Thoughts. It has taken years to draft this book, a book written with mental strength and fortitude. I first had to face my insecurities, to deal with the shame and embarrassment before I could summon the courage and be comfortable to go public about my past. While authoring this book, I needed to consciously protect my mental state. I remembered the warning from my EMDR therapist that I must be careful of things that may be triggering. And yes, recalling these events was. When needed, I would stop writing, clear my head, return to my safe space, and later return to writing when I felt stronger. Coming from such a toxic, narcissistic, dysfunctional family, being horribly sexually abused and pimped out as a child, I am amazed that I turned out as well as I did. Indeed, I have my faults. I have made many mistakes and have done things I regret, but I feel I have triumphed along the way. My innocence and childhood were taken away from me. I learned early on to live with secrets, distorted truths, denials, lies, and deceptions, cover up, pretend, suppress feelings and emotions, bear pain silently, and not allow myself to feel. I grew up controlled by gaslighting, manipulation, fear, coercion, guilt, and extortion. I was emotionally isolated and alone. Due to my love for my sister, my brother emotionally blackmailed and held me hostage. I grew up also being controlled by threats, many threats. But were these threats real, or just some of the many lies used to manipulate and keep me under control? Now that I have published this book, will I succumb to these threats? Will I become another Aiden Brown, or someone with a mysterious unresolved death? Time will tell. I have struggled with tremendous shame, embarrassment, humiliation, and inadequacy, leading to years of anxiety, depression, flashbacks, PTSD, and low self-esteem. I am not one to quickly form friendships. I have an innate fear of trust in people. I prefer to go it alone and struggle to ask for help. I do not like to be dependent on others. I am fearful that there will always be a price to pay. I most often prefer to be alone. I do not need or always want to be surrounded by people. I can be perfectly content being alone all day and do not need to be constantly connected. So, a big no for constant phone calls, text messages, emails, or being continuously connected through social media. In my last job, I worked as CEO of a significant international foods distribution company. I helped it grow from a multi-million to a multi-billion-dollar business. For about 7 years, I also served as an agricultural industry advisor to the Obama administration. I was well respected at this company and by my academic, government, and industry circle colleagues. One of the biggest challenges I struggled with was the constant demands on this job to travel and be connected to people. In addition, one of the most dreaded aspects of my job was forced socialization. I had to attend countless large-scale company functions, put on a plastic smile, work the crowds, kiss babies, shake hands, and appear that I enjoyed it. I clearly did not want to be there, and would bug out early when I could. These functions were a mild form of mental torture because they resurfaced my feelings of a living lie. They made me feel phony and fake inside. It takes me a long time to trust and emotionally share with another. As an adult, I have become keenly skeptical of organized religion. My belief in God is solid, but organized religion is more damaging than good. I have often wondered, why? Why did this happen to me? What did I do to cause it? More painful to me, sometimes more than the acts of sexual abuse, was the lack of acceptance by some family members and friends who questioned my story. The questioning was so intense that I was made to feel like a liar, or a person making up a tale. I often wondered when the sexual abuse and the satanic cult ring began. Did it start in my generation, or was it more insidious? Perhaps intergenerational and passed down from one generation to the next, and always, of course, cloaked in secrecy. It has been over 50 years now. Is it still active? And is that why my father took it so hard that it caused him to have a massive heart attack when he learned of it? It strikes me as curiously odd that my father had a bad relationship with one of his brothers, so bad that he would not talk about it. I also remember an elderly man on a nearby farm with whom we children were forbidden to associate. Our mother told us, "He is evil. You're not to ever go over there." This elderly man was the grandfather of 3 brothers, 3 of my confirmed abusers, who were part of that sex ring that I survived. Part of the sex ring that I serviced. So maybe my parents knew a lot more than they were willing to admit. I will never know for sure. And when I came out as gay, I was reminded that this was the reason why I was abused, as if I had somehow asked for it, egged it on, and given cause for the abuse to happen. According to some, you see, since I was gay, I wanted this and caused it to happen. I was made to feel responsible. Imagine this, a 6-year-old boy accountable for his abuse. I will also carry these scars in my mind forever, just like the scars of my abuse. Despite all of my problems and issues, I became a much stronger person. If there was any good to have come from this situation, that was it. Who would have ever thought that a short, emotionally withdrawn, sexually abused farm boy could overcome his demons? How could he have survived his trauma and gone on to achieve a PhD and manage a career that ended with retirement on a high note? For the most part, I achieved all of this with no resources to turn to during the abuse. When this was going down in the 1960s and 1970s, there were no 1-800 numbers, local or national sex abuse hotlines to call, no websites, and no support groups to contact. These types of support resources, which are commonly available today, were unheard of then. So, you see, if you were an abuse victim, you were totally on your own. Although, not always. I would repeatedly rely on Grandfather Edmondson's words of wisdom throughout my life, especially when life was hard. I have lived my life determined that my brother would not break me. I refused to give in, no matter what he did with my body or how he tried to own my mind. I had developed a determined steel will. This bastard was not going to win. I showed this bastard that I was better than him. I was going to be successful despite him. I became a person who initially gave people the benefit of the doubt, but learned quickly to be cautious and very protective of myself. I became a no-nonsense person, pragmatic, yet eternally optimistic. I have lived with people questioning my story mainly because I am a male. How could I allow this to happen? Shouldn't I have done more to get help? Why did I not defend myself? Was I a willing participant because I am gay? During therapy, I learned that outsiders do not have the right to question your situation or why you could not break away or defend yourself. How will they understand? With what experience are they qualified? That is, unless they've walked in your path. When one is suffering and mentally controlled, they are at the whim of their abuser until they gain the strength and courage to confront them. The journey to break away and gain strength and courage depends on multiple things, but mostly one's circumstances and sheer fortitude. Although I could not control what happened to me early on, I was determined that this would not define me. So instead, I decided to take this bad in my life, turn it around, and try to become the best person I could be. And I want to be fundamentally and distinctly clear about my next point. A mental illness does not excuse one from being mean to others and to abuse. I refuse to accept that. I am sure that my brother had multiple mental problems, and yes, terrible things did happen to him. That is a fact. But given so, he was still a functioning member of society, and he was capable of making rational decisions and a life for himself. He clearly knew right from wrong. He was truly mentally competent. Yet, he made choices, terrible choices, to continue with a cycle of abuse and revenge. He could have also chosen to stop the cycle of abuse, have it end, and live to never let it happen again. One major life lesson for me was the danger of denials and keeping secrets. Families not talking about their problems, pretending nothing was wrong, and not correctly facing issues can all lead to lifelong adverse consequences. When we do not face our history and issues, our denials and silence enable and embolden wrongdoers, giving them the green light to continue ahead. Then, the horrible history repeats. Looking back, there were excellent opportunities to confront Rusty early on to prevent him from further abusing me. My brutal rape, my anal surgery in the hospital, the bloody bed sheets, the rape of Beth, finding a satanic cult book under the bed, attempted talks with my mother, and with the visiting priest, and so on. And Beth and I did not get justice from our abusers. There were no trials, courtrooms, sensational media events, nor prison time for the perpetrators of crimes committed against us. Instead, our respite knew that we survived, overcame, and now have very good lives. Lives far beyond any life that any of our perpetrators could ever have. I have often wondered how life would have been had my abuse been stopped early on, or if my abuse never happened at all. What would I be like now? How would I have turned out? We all had to deal with the outcome of our upbringing. 3 of the 5 children had at least one divorce, and one was divorced twice. We all had our unique experiences and memories. Two of us mentally had blocked out two of us had mentally blocked out periods only to have them flash back and haunt us later. We all suffer from issues of low self-esteem and self-worth. We all suffer from depression. 3 of us underwent work with major therapy. The remaining 4 of us still struggle to thoroughly discuss the past. I guess it will be this way for the rest of our lives. Now, back to my recurring dream about the boy running from men wearing red coats on horses. I tie it to the history of the successful sea merchant from my mother's ancestral line. This is why I have often wondered if my ancestors had somehow reincarnated into me. Perhaps it was because we had much in common. Both of us went through horrific events in our early lives. Yet, in the end, we became stronger, persevered, made the best of our situations, and refused to let the bad destroy us. Could the advice about the 99% of life be an ancestral story given to him and passed down through the generations of my grandfather, and then to me? I have already shared this advice with my children, and I plan to pass it along to my grandchildren. So, as part of my legacy, I hope this advice will serve them as well as it has aided me. And that's the end of the excerpt. As I said beforehand, it is a very heavy piece. And as that's only a summary and an introductional trigger warning, I can only imagine how the rest of the book is going to be. I don't know if I have the mental strength or fortitude to read it. I feel like that would be a book that would take me a long time to read, just because I would have to take a lot of breaks from it. But that was an excerpt from Boy in the Barn by Kurt B. Ellis. As I said, it was the opening introduction with the trigger warnings and his final thoughts there in chapter 29. I don't know if that was the full of chapter 29 or just a part of it, but still very heavy book. And if you are so inclined, absolutely go check this out. As I said, the website is not up just yet, but I will be putting it up there. Kurt, welcome. And sir, just hearing that little excerpt from your life, I'm astonished that you were able to kind of make something of yourself and accomplish so much. So bravo to you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to read it. But yes, like I said, as soon as this live is over, which I'll be ending it here soon as to not overlap with between the pages, I'll go ahead and I'll put this website up so that you can get a link to Kurt Ellis, which I do have his TikTok handle here. I see him in the chat, so please go give him a follow, give him some support. Same with Mark. Go give him a follow, give him support. I'll put this up, and within the next couple days, Mark, if you're still here, and Kurt, I'll have the excerpts of just my readings put on the website as well, and they'll be on YouTube as well. I'll send you both the links so you can share them out if you would like to. Anyways, for the 2 authors, if you guys have not heard, following this, this whole idea stemmed from Sean Amick of Between the Pages. His podcast comes up here at 8 o'clock, usually goes from 8 to 9. He does author interviews, so if you would like to get on the podcast and do an interview and further promote your book, I highly encourage it. Sean is a wonderful interviewer. Megan, who is in the chat as well, is a co-host of Between the Pages. So by all means, hop on there. They do writer workshops. They do author interviews. They do a lot of good stuff. They also do readings prior to the podcast or the live, where they read other indie author works as well. So please go check it out. And everybody that is in here, please follow these 2 artists. Let me go ahead and put the promo back up. Follow both of these authors. Give them as much support as you possibly can. Anyways, I'm going to cut the live short here. I appreciate you guys for tuning in, and I appreciate both authors for giving me the opportunity to read your work. Have a good night, guys. Thank you.